What's up, everybody? My name is Scott Paddock, and today we're going to talk about 4 really easy ways to make your improv lines sound more interesting. After my students have figured out how to play chords, what scales go with the chords, oftentimes the next question is, what can I do to make my improv lines sound more interesting so it doesn't just sound like chords and scales? So today I'm going to give you 4 techniques that are really easy that you can use to make your line sound way more interesting. And to do that, we are going to use a B minor 7 chord. If you have played Impressions, which has a B minor 7 chord in it for a very long time, you've probably asked yourself, what can I do to make this sound way more interesting? So today I'm going to use that chord and the corresponding scale, which is a B mixolydian scale, to help you figure out how to make those kind of lines more interesting when you have one chord for a long time. And you're trying to make it sound like more than just a chord or a scale. And of course you can use it in shorter examples also if you have a chord for a measure or two. But we are going to do this whole thing on B minor 7 on the alto saxophone. So that would be your B Dorian minor. So it'd be B to B and an F sharp with an F sharp, a C sharp, and a G sharp. If you are a tenor player, that would be E Dorian minor, and if you are a C instrument, that would be D Dorian minor. Again, so we're going to use B Dorian minor, which has an F sharp, a C sharp, and a G sharp. Okay, so if you were going to improvise using this scale and play it in a jazz style, you probably play mostly 8th notes using your B Dorian minor scale, and your prominent notes would be your chord tones, which would be B, D, F sharp, and A. This is what that would sound like. Sounds pretty jazzy, right? It sounds like you're playing the right notes. Everything sounds good, but it does not sound interesting. So let's talk about the first easy way to make this line sound way more interesting. And it's actually very, very easy. All you're going to do is change your articulation. Instead of just playing regular swing 8th notes with a regular jazz articulation, you're going to bring out some goal notes. You're going to make some notes more important. By doing that, it's going to give your lines a lot more direction, and your lines are going to sound more interesting. So I'm just going to play the notes in the B Dorian minor scale again, improvise, but this time I'm going to bring out some goal notes. I'm going to play mostly 8th notes, but you're going to hear direction changes because of the way I articulate. Did you hear how much more interesting that line was than this one? The only real big difference was I was using more articulation. I was articulating notes that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be articulated, and that made the line have more direction because of the goal notes and the change in direction with the articulation. Okay, the second way to make your improv lines sound way more interesting is add syncopation. In other words, you're going to add some rests in there so that your E's, ands, and uhs become way more important. So instead of just playing straight 8th notes, as your main ingredient, this time you're going to put rests in there and you're going to make these syncopated notes sound really good. Again, just a very simple trick of adding some rests in there, and it makes your lines sound way more interesting. The third way, use your modes, especially if you're playing a song like Impressions where you're on that B minor 7 forever. Start on the 2nd degree, which would be C sharp, but stay in the key of B, but start on C sharp. So your main notes would be C sharp, E, G sharp, B, or start on the 3rd, start on the 4th. Just use your modes. You can do chord outlines staying in the key of B minor 7, but using chord tones from your modes. So it'll sound like this. That made it sound totally different. Even though you're in the key of B Dorian minor the whole time, which is 3 sharps, if you're bringing out your C sharps, your E's, and your G sharps, or your E's, your G sharps, your B's, and your D's. It just makes it sound way more interesting, and it gets you out of that one scale dilemma of everything sounding super inside. This is what it sounds like just playing in B minor. This is what it sounds like again using the modes. It just sounds like you're weaving through chords, and you kind of are, but the chords just all correspond to B, Dorian minor. And the fourth way to make your lines sound way more interesting is add some chromaticism. You can do chromatic notes in between like your third and your fifth. You can start off chromatic. You can put chromaticism anywhere as long as you land on notes that are in the scale or in the chord, and it's going to work. Lots of chromaticism there, and it all sounded correct because I was starting on strong notes and ending on strong notes. So what you put in between isn't as important because they're kind of the go-between notes. So you could start on a B and go chromatic to an F sharp because those are chord tones. You can start on the F sharp and go to a D. You could start on an A and go chromatic A sharp, B. Chromaticism all over the place. You could play a whole chromatic scale. As long as you start it and stop it on a chord tone, your chromaticism is always going to sound really good. Another way to add chromaticism is through approach notes. Approach notes are when you hit the goal note, your target note, from a half step above or below. So adding chromaticism through the use of passing tones, in other words, starting on one note in your chromatic scale and ending on another one further down, preferably with those both being in the strong notes in the scale, so chord tones, or adding approach notes. Both of those are going to be a great way to add chromaticism to your improv lines. By adding those four techniques, you can take bland and boring lines that just sound like you're playing scales and chords and make them sound super cool and super interesting by adding different articulations, by putting in some syncopation, using your modes really well, and adding some chromaticism. By using those four techniques, your lines are really going to come alive, and you're not going to sound like you're playing basic improv lines. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. If you now understand 4 new techniques on how to make your improv lines sound more interesting, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. If you have topics that you would like me to cover in future videos, please leave me a comment below. Thanks a lot.